Chapter 17, In the Course of a Lifetime. A few days after Phoebe and I had seen Mr. Berkway and Mrs. Cadaver whacking away at the rhododendron, I walked home with Phoebe after school. She was as crotchety and sullen as a three-legged mule, and I was not quite sure why. She had been asking me why I had not said anything to my father about Mrs. Cadaver and Mr. Berkway, and I told her that I was waiting for the right time. "Your father was over there yesterday," Phoebe said. "I saw him. He'd better watch out." The truth is, I was getting worried. I promised myself that I would speak to him that night. "What would you do," Phoebe said, "if Mrs. Cadaver chopped up your father? What would you do? Where would you go? Would you go live with your mother?" It surprised me when she said that, reminding me that I had told Phoebe nothing about my mother. I don't know why I did this, but I said, "Yes, I suppose I would go live with her." That was impossible, and I knew it, but for some reason I could not tell Phoebe that, so I lied. "You don't seem very worried about it," Phoebe said. "I would certainly be worried if my father started going over to Mrs. Cadaver's." Phoebe's mother was sitting at the kitchen table when we walked in. In front of her was a pan of burned brownies. She was blowing her nose. "Oh, sweetie," she said to Phoebe, "you startled me." We dumped our books on a chair, and Mrs. Winterbottom asked, "How was it?" "How was what?" Phoebe said. "Why, sweetie, school, of course. How was it? How are your classes? How was it?" She blew her nose. "It was okay." "Okay? Just okay?" Mrs. Winterbottom suddenly leaned over and kissed Phoebe's cheek. "I'm not a baby, you know," Phoebe said, wiping the kiss off her face. Mrs. Winterbottom glanced at me. "I know that, Phoebe," she said. Phoebe kicked her shoe against the table. "I don't suppose I could get another pair of loafers?" she asked. "Another pair? Why, sweetie, we just bought you a pair." She looked down at Phoebe's shoes. "Don't they fit?" "They're a little tight," Phoebe said. "Maybe they'll stretch." "I don't think so." Mrs. Winterbottom was stabbing the brownies with a knife. "Want one?" she asked. "They're a little burned, aren't they?" Phoebe said. "Besides, I'm too fat." "Oh, sweetie, you're not fat," Mrs. Winterbottom said. "I am." "No, you're not." I am," Phoebe shouted at her mother. "You don't have to bake things for me," she said. "I'm too fat, and, besides, you don't have to wait here for me to come home. I'm 13 now." Phoebe marched upstairs. Mrs. Winterbottom offered me a brownie, so I sat down at the table. What I started doing was remembering the day before my mother left. I did not know it was to be her last day home. Several times that day, my mother asked me if I wanted to walk up in the fields with her. It was drizzling outside, and I was cleaning out my desk, and I just did not feel like going. "Maybe later," I kept saying. When she asked me for about the 10th time, I said, "No, I don't want to go. Why do you keep asking me?" I don't know why I did that. I didn't mean anything by it, but that was one of the last memories she had of me, and I wished I could take it back. Phoebe's sister Prudence breezed into the house, slamming the door behind her. "I just blew it. I know it," she wailed. "Oh, sweetie," her mother said. "I did," Prudence said. I did. "Prudence, your father does not like you to use that phrase, blew it." "Why not?" Mrs. Winterbottom looked tired and sad. "Oh, I don't know," she said. "I suppose he thinks it doesn't sound very respectable." Mrs. Winterbottom half-heartedly chipped away at the burned brownies and asked Prudence if she would have another chance at cheerleading tryouts. "Yes, tomorrow, but I know I'm going to blow up." Her mother said, "Maybe I'll come along and watch." I could tell that Mrs. Winterbottom was trying to rise above some awful sadness she was feeling, but Prudence couldn't see that. Prudence had her own agenda, just as I had my own agenda that day. My mother wanted me to walk with her. I couldn't see my own mother's sadness. "What?" Prudence said. "Come along and watch?" "Yes, wouldn't that be nice?" "No," Prudence said. No, you can't. It would be awful." "Awful?" Mrs. Winterbottom said. "Awful, awful, awful." As I was wondering why she didn't tell Prudence to jump in the lake, Mrs. Winterbottom burst into tears and left the table. Prudence glowered at me and stomped out of the kitchen. I sat there looking around at the walls. I heard the front door open and shut, and I heard Phoebe call my name. She came in from the house waving a white envelope. "Guess what was on the steps?" she said. Mrs. Winterbottom reappeared and took the envelope. "Have you opened it?" she asked Phoebe. "Not yet." "I'll open it." her mother said. She turned the envelope over and over before she slowly unsealed and slipped it out the message. She held it close to her so that we couldn't see. "Well?" Phoebe demanded. "Oh," Mrs. Winterbottom said, "who is doing this?" She held out the piece of paper. On it was written, "In the course of a lifetime, what does it matter?" Prudence joined us. "What the heck does that mean?" she asked. My mother said, "Where are these coming from?" "I honestly couldn't say," Phoebe said. Prudence flopped down on the sofa. "Well, I have more important things to worry about, I can assure you. I know I'm going to blow those cheerleading tryouts. I just know it." On and on she went until Phoebe said, "Gripes, Prudence, in the course of a lifetime, what does it matter?" At that moment, it was as if a click went off in Mrs. Winterbottom's brain. She put her hand to her mouth and stared out the window. She was invisible to Prudence and Phoebe, though. They did not notice. Prudence said, "What is that supposed to mean?" Phoebe said, "I was just thinking, are these tryouts such a big deal? Will you even remember them in 5 years?" "Yes," Prudence said. "Yes, I most certainly will." "How about 10 years? Will you remember them in 10? "Yes," Prudence said. As I walked home, I thought about the message. In the course of a lifetime, what does it matter? I said it over and over. It seemed odd that Phoebe found a way to use that saying right after it had arrived. I wondered about the mysterious messenger, and I wondered about all the things in the course of a lifetime that would not matter. I did not think cheerleading tryouts would matter, nor shoes that were too tight. I wondered if yelling at your mother would matter. I was not sure about that, but I was certain that if your mother left, it would be something that mattered in the whole long course of your lifetime.